Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this beautiful conversation that I'm about to have with my predecessor as the music director at the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra, André Raphel. Andre, it's so good to see you, and I remember very fondly the number of conversations that we had, especially right when I began at the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra. After I signed my contract, you were my first phone call, and now here we are at the 95th anniversary celebration. Welcome.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here with you, and it's amazing how the time flies.
It really is. We met in person for the first time for a conversation, some food and drink at the restaurant that's on 12th Street there. It used to be called the Metropolitan, right?
That's
And
correct.
since then it's changed hands and it's no longer there, but that now it's called Ellen Jackson. That's my new favorite restaurant. And if when I have a conversation with the 10th music director of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra, I'll probably take them out to eat there. So the first question I want to ask you is, how are you, and how does it feel to be on the precipice of this return to the podium at the Capitol Theater?
Well, I'm doing very well, and I'm so honored to be have the opportunity to come back to Wheeling, to work with the orchestra, and to appear on this very special 95th anniversary celebration. It's really a statement, I think, about the importance of the orchestra in Wheeling and what the orchestra means to the community. So it will be no doubt filled with a lot of excitement, I think, and given this program, which you've planned, which has many different points of entry, I think, for the audience, I think it's going to be a very special night.
I love what you said about the points of entry because why don't we talk about the program of the concert a little bit since we've started to dive into that? The first half is going to be all new music about Wheeling in one way or another. Just to give folks who are listening a brief overview, the first piece is a composition by Dr. Matthew Harder, who's the chair of music studies at West Liberty University, which is the university most local to us at the Wheeling Symphony. And he's written a piece for a new ensemble that we've created called the Community Choir that's made of several dozen members of the course who are from Wheeling itself or from surrounding Ohio Valley communities. And actually, I got the chance to conduct that ensemble for the first time last week and hear their stories about why they're there. And there are people as young as 17 and as old as 77 in the group. And the stories vary widely, as you can imagine, including the poet who wrote the libretto for the piece, the composer's wife, and his two kids. I mean, you can imagine these are very special things. So that piece is going to be called Where I'm From and is about 10 minutes long. And the words that the chorus will be singing will be very meaningful to residents of Wheeling because it references lots of special things about our community. And then after that, we have a new piece in tribute to the musical journey of Elisa Kohansky, our principal cellist, someone we both know very, very well, who's been the principal cellist, I think, of the entirety of both of our tenures. Elisa is a world traveler and has performed concerts in more than 100 countries. And most recently, she performed in her seventh continent as she went to Australia and New Zealand to perform on the cello as part of a special WSO organized trip to that special place for her to complete this kind of worldwide journey. She's even performed in Antarctica. And so we commissioned a piece 7 movements long that tells the story about music and Elisa's story in each of those places. So that'll be the first half. But then the second half is where we're going to celebrate a tribute to Maurice Ravel on his 150th anniversary of his birth. And Andre, why don't you tell us a little bit about the piece you'll be conducting that leads off the second half?
The piece that will begin the second half of the program is Ravel's Whirlwind La Valse. It is an incredible piece within Ravel's output because what he tried to do in that piece was to parody, in a way, a Strauss waltz and all of the traditions that are part of playing that music that we know from the Viennese school. And so what we get is this waltz through the eyes and through the musical language of Ravel, which is fascinating because nothing is really what we expect it to be. Uh,
Mhm.
tempi are they move ahead, they pull back. The sonorities that we hear are much more attuned to something, we'd hear in the early 20th century than at the time of Johann Strauss Jr. Um, and it's just an incredible sort of journey that you go on as you enter this world of Ravel. It's fascinating because, of course, this piece also was important because it accounted for a big split between Ravel and Diaghilev. It was originally written to be danced to, and Diaghilev, when he saw the score of this piece, he saw it and he thought there were no possibilities for dance, and so Ravel was not too happy about that, and they never really worked together again after so many great collaborations. So it's very special also to be able to bring this work to Wheeling once again because the orchestra and I had the pleasure of have had the pleasure of doing it twice together, and so it'll be neat now to see how it reforms itself again. It's a piece that's always different. I think anytime anyone performs it, so it'll be neat to do it again.
It's so beautiful to have that background on not only the piece itself, but on your relationship to the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra through the piece, and how interesting that you performed it twice with them. So this return to the third time, you'll see some new people in the orchestra and a new setting in which to make that, as we have the chorus set up behind the symphony, because once you enter the world of Ravel, it's hard to leave it. So we decided, let's not do that. And the final piece on the program is going to be the Daphnis and Chloe second suite. It's one of those pieces, don't you think, Andre, that orchestral musicians feel like marked special occasions? It's one of those kind of landmark moments in the repertoire for the type of embodying of a story that
Mhm.
the symphony orchestra can achieve. Um, do you have any words about the Daphnis and Chloe before I dive into a few?
Yeah, it's such a terrific piece, and I think you mentioned it being a work that's often played on occasions, for example. And this is the case with it being the closing of the season. It's a great work to end the season with. Sometimes we also hear it, interestingly enough, at the opening of seasons, at the start of the season. Um, and I think it's because this piece in each of these three movements, has so much. Well, it's a big orchestra, of course, that this piece calls for. There's so many wonderful, I'll let you talk about it, but there's so many wonderful soli in the piece for many different instruments in the orchestra. Um, and it's just it has such an infectious
Hmm.
sort of rhythm about it that I think it makes it a natural kind of piece to program on a celebratory occasion and also close the season with.
Yes, I love that idea of the infectious nature of the rhythm because there's three movements, as you mentioned, and the final of them is also a whirlwind, like you described the valse. It's in five instead of three, but in this case, it's extremely fast, and there it is almost unrelenting in its power. It's like one big crescendo from beginning to the end, and so it is the biggest orchestra, maybe besides someone like Mahler, that we would have on the stage, and all of those instruments are combining to this unrelenting force. And I play clarinet, so the E flat clarinet has a very famous solo there, and then the power of the final moments is extraordinary. And there's an optional choral part that we will include so that the community choir can both begin and end this beautiful concert together with the symphony. The earlier movements, the second movement, it's telling a story, and the principal flute takes the lead in this part of the piece. And then the opening movement is very much impressionistic. There's a sunrise. There's the setting of the place that we're going to occupy in this fairy tale story. And Debussy and Ravel occupy a special place in the French Impressionistic school, and I think that maybe the Valse has that in a different sense, where it
Mhm.
was meant, as you said, to be balletic, but also it stands very much on its own as a symphonic work. Here, for the Daphnis and Chloe, I am for the audience going to provide a little bit of the story to them from the stage in advance because I think that it would serve their understanding of the journey that the music takes us on really well. So there's so much to look forward to. Now, let's take a little bit of a turn here, Andre, because these occasions, the half decade marker at a symphony orchestra, really matter. And I think it's a good moment of reflection, especially as you're coming back to a place that was such a linchpin in your career. Um, would you mind taking a moment to say, what are some of the memories that are most poignant to you about your time in Wheeling? What are the things that you felt were markers during your time? And what place does the orchestra occupy in your heart as a person?
Well, let me start with the your last question first,
Sure.
because it is so deeply tied to um, coming back to work with the orchestra again. Um, I always felt that there was a very special esprit de corps uh, with the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra. Um, John knows very well that these musicians come to Wheeling in addition to the musicians who play in the community, but the musicians in the Wheeling Symphony come from the Pittsburgh area, they come from the Cleveland area, and there's a real sort of coming together um, of these musicians, and they are very much still part of the Wheeling community, which
Hmm.
is extraordinary, and perhaps accounts for the long history of the orchestra. Um, but you don't often have this, especially amongst a regional orchestra where the musicians are so vested in the community. And I think it makes it very special, and it makes it very special to come back. Um, when I think about my time as serving as music director of the orchestra, um, certainly there are many highlights, many things that one could point to. But one of the things that I think I was proudest of was this establishment of the college series of concerts, which we had, which um, endeavored to bring more people to the orchestra, endeavored to reach the college community in different ways by making the orchestra more accessible. Something that I'm glad to see has really continued. If one thinks about even this commission project that you have, with which you open the program, this is really wonderful. Um, but that started this college series of concerts started with four colleges and ended up being 13 colleges and universities in the area. So that's something that I was very proud of. Of course, the musical growth of the orchestra, and I think also the commitment to the composers of our time, something which I'm also happy that has continued. The orchestra had an opportunity. We had an opportunity to give world premieres by Richard Danielpour, close relationships with Jennifer Higdon, co-commissioning composers like Kenneth Fuchs, Ellen Tay-Swillick. Um, and so this feeling of the orchestra being a living and breathing entity, and reflecting the times in which we live, I think is something that, again, it's wonderful to see uh, continue, and it's very special then for me to be able to come back and to see how it's continued to grow. I always think that um, as a music director, perhaps the most important thing that we can give to an organization is, I think, a sense of allowing the organization to grow and
Mm.
find itself through the music. This is something that is a part, I believe, of this program that John has put together, and certainly of the way the orchestra continues to reflect the community where it exists.
I love that idea of the orchestra finding itself as an organization through music and embodying two ideals at once, right? Like you and I both have a close relationship with living composers and have found a way through the WSO's programming to ensure that our relationship to composers was one that was very fruitful over our years. And in addition to that, the WSO, with the commitment from the players that you're mentioning, who are at such a high level artistically, will also be able to deliver spectacular performances of some of the most difficult pieces in our canonical repertoire, like these two pieces we have in Ravel. It's a special aspect of this orchestra, and I'm with you. I go around, as do you, and conduct regional orchestras throughout the nation, and the spirit of the WSO is a unique one. Something you mentioned in your remark was the way that you grew the orchestra artistically during your time as its leader. I think it might be interesting for our audience to hear what are the types of things you're thinking about when you're rehearsing the group, when you're programming for the group, and you know it's a multi-year relationship as the music director, as opposed to when you're guest conducting a group. How do you envision that process unfolding over your time with the WSO, and what were the things that you thought about as you endeavored to raise at the artistic level of the ensemble?
Yeah, it's a very good question, John, because I think that one, first of all, I think thinks very much about the sound of the orchestra, how one can use the repertoire in a certain way to build the sound and the stylistic approach of the orchestra. And that happens, I think, because of many reasons. It happens because of thinking about, well, how the orchestra plays at a given time when one assumes the position, but thinking also about what repertoire and has not been played, what there hasn't been an emphasis on. So, for example, when I began with the orchestra didn't hadn't played a lot of French music, or maybe
Mm,
they hadn't played that repertoire in a long time. There had not been such a big emphasis on Mahler, um, and there hadn't been maybe such a big emphasis on English music as well. So I knew in thinking about how I what could help the orchestra to grow musically, I knew that there would be a certain arc, if you will,
mm,
to the programming. We would, of course, always play certain standard repertoire because it's necessary for the orchestra to grow, but that we would enhance that, as you um, so brilliantly put it, with the works of our time, with new music. And so I started to look at um, in terms of when we could, do our first Mahler symphony, as sort of thinking about how we would first approach, interestingly enough, French music, which
mhm.
which seems far in some way, but it certainly would tell me a bit about the capability of the orchestra technically and to achieve certain sounds. And so that was very much a part of the thinking in how to how to build the sound of the orchestra um, in certain standard repertoire, and to build a stylistic approach of how the orchestra played. And I think I think we were successful in establishing um, a an approach to composers, um, because that's a part of what we do as artists, as conductors, is find ways to have the sound, the the music of a specific composer speak, and that's all a part of this journey. As John knows, in terms of programming and building um, the sound of the orchestra.
I think that this year, which was my sixth in the position, is the first year that I've begun to understand this thing that you already arrived at, which is the building of the sound. Because first and foremost, being honest, I got the job at 33 years old and had never consistently conducted a professional orchestra before. And so I was learning there's so much difference between a youth orchestra and a professional orchestra. If I do that, what do they do? What do they need from me as a leader? How much should I trust that they are experts in this repertoire just as much as I, if not more so? And what does that mean for what my role is as the leader, both artistically and organizationally? And then after 5 months on the job, COVID hit. And immediately, although we kept performing, it was in 13-person group. We had microphones and we're in a church. We were doing a TV broadcast. So this is the second year where I've had two normal years in a row to start to understand on a regular basis what the full orchestra can do and what the potential is. And we've added 12 people to the group this year through auditions for the first time in my tenure as well, because of course COVID derailed that entire planning process. So I think that's something interesting. So if you're listening to this interview and you're a regular audience member of the WSO, track that with us. What is the sound of the orchestra? How are we approaching things? What would you describe as the style of playing? And it'll be a very interesting experiment to hear two different conductors, both of whom have deep relationships with the orchestra, conduct the same composer back to back with the same players, right? Like this will be an experiment in what does a conductor do to change the sound as an individual artist, very starkly. Wouldn't you agree?
I would certainly agree. Something that you said, though, John, really struck me in terms of the experience of your experience and the how COVID, the lockdown, impacted the performances of the orchestra and your time with them also. And I think that's not to be underestimated. I think what's really amazing to think about when we think back to those days of COVID lockdown and how we came through it is that we knew on the other side that there was going to be a new excitement, a new energy, once the pandemic subsided, in live music. And we knew that there would be a new appreciation, if you will, for what an orchestra does. And so that's what's really so wonderful to be a part of in this celebratory 95th anniversary celebration concert. Um, to think about the fact that there are actually orchestras larger than the Wheeling Symphony, unfortunately, who are no longer, that don't exist. So, what a statement it is for for a city the size of Wheeling to now be celebrating 95 years. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary, and it's something I think that's very special.
And speaking of things that are special, you were not just an artist in the community, but you were a beloved figure and leader. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to have a big smile on their face if they see this conversation online, and wonder how you're doing. How is your family? How are your beautiful kids? Would you give a little life update for people that miss you?
Well, thank you very much. It's So everyone is well. My wife is well. Our kids, the four of them. It's very interesting because um, they were born during the period of not all of them, but we have four, and they were born. Some of them were born during the tenure, my tenure in Wheeling. So it's they've all grown up now and they live lives of their own. We see them occasionally, but as for me, um, I am continuing to guest conduct and think about what music means. I began this season as the principal conductor and artistic advisor of the Hudson Valley Symphony Orchestra in New York. So that has been getting to know a new orchestra, a new community, and seeing how we build there. Um, it's been life has been very fulfilling, and it's the one thing that has been the constant has really been music and thinking about how it has played such a central role in my life and my development. Um, makes it really special to think about what the Wheeling Symphony, what the community of Wheeling has meant to my own growth. And so it'll be very special then to come back as a conductor laureate now and to see many people that I haven't seen in several years and to work with the orchestra again.
Yeah, and the last question that I'd like to ask you, um, when you're on the podium, I'm a younger conductor walking in your footsteps. And at the Wheeling Symphony now, we have an assistant conductor and we have a conducting fellow. The fellow is named Sean Hancher, and he just got his master's degree from West Virginia University in orchestral conducting. He's a product of our very own youth orchestra system. He's a fine violinist. And so we're trying to educate the next generation of leaders. And as a conductor, we are thrust into leadership, are we not?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the last question I wanted to ask you is, what advice do you have for artists and conductors listening to this, who may be future music directors of regional orchestras, especially one like in Wheeling that is such a hallmark of the community? What are the types of things that you would want them to know about the responsibility that is being a music director in any city across the country that supports its orchestra like Wheeling does?
Hmm. I had someone, a great conductor, who gave me many years ago some incredible advice. He said, "People uh, gravitate towards music, uh, towards conductors, because they want to be inspired. Our job is really to inspire people at all levels, in all walks of life. Um, there is so much that the conductor or the music director does that is not seen. It's the work behind the scenes. It's the studying of the scores. It's the working with the orchestra library. It's the rehearsing with the musicians. And then there are all the administrative duties. But that's not seen many times by the public. And that's where we can have a real impact on bringing people closer to the music, on helping people to understand the traditions of the past and to appreciate what this music means for our world today. Advice is, study everything. Go listen to orchestras, to live, orchestral performances. Go listen to opera. Hear and think about what works for certain people, and why it may not work for you if you're a conductor. Um, all of these things, I think, our world travel, our um, understanding of tradition, our understanding of how we breathe are very, very important, I think, in an artistic life for a music director, um, because in the end, it's about relating to other people.
That's so profound, and to capitalize on the last thing you said there, it depends on how we relate to other people. To me, I've never felt like music was more urgent. Whatever one's personal politics are, the country is divided right now. And in Wheeling, we know that there's a lot of division. People are on both sides of the political aisle. But in the concert hall, we put aside those divisions. On the stage, the orchestra says we are committed to one thing, creating beauty together. And then in the audience, they're there to receive that and to be inspired, which is a word that you mentioned several times in your answer. So, what is a way that you would encourage an audience member who's coming to this concert? How would you want them to enter? What space would you want them to be in, especially if this is their first time visiting us in a while because it's a special occasion?
Yeah, uh, John, I think you touched on something very important, which is at the heart of where we are as a nation, as a world, um, and that is the sort of divisiveness that exists. The arts are the place that we come together, right? They reflect the times we live in, and um, um, they give us a connection to the past and help us understand the past. When one comes to the concert hall, I often like to think of it, John, as you don't have to know anything about the program. You don't have to have a certain level of musical education. You just need to be an open book. The music is gonna wash over you. It's gonna take you, and it's gonna take you to places maybe that you haven't experienced, and places that you didn't know you were gonna go. And so I like to think of it as come to the concert to experience the sound, the history, the dynamic sort of um, performance that only a live hearing a live orchestra can bring. You'll find it to be an extraordinary experience.
I think that is a great final word for our audience today. Thank you, Maestro Raphel, for your stewardship of this organization in such a beautiful way. I was lucky enough to inherit your legacy, and you were lucky enough to inherit Rachel's, right? I don't think anybody would confuse the three of us personality wise, right? But I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the WSO is that they have had very different types of leaders through their history. You are the eighth, and I'm the ninth, and we have no idea what's in store for it in year 100 and beyond, but it's a pleasure and a privilege to be leading it in that direction with you on the podium. Our concert will be Thursday night, May 15th at the Capitol Theater. There are tickets available at wheelingsymphony.com. Andre, thank you, and we'll see you in Wheeling in 2.5 weeks.
Thank you, John.